I wanted to check out the section with Sebastian Gorka, because to me, there's a lot of portions of the Trump strategy that I think are indefensible from not only my worldview, because I disagree with how Trump's approaching the negotiations around the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but also from someone like Sebastian Gorka's worldview, somebody who's comes from that neo-conservative ilk, somebody who is definitely an ideologue when it comes to governments like Cuba, governments like Iran, governments like Russia. And so I want to hear what he would have to say, how he would answer to somebody coming towards Trump's diplomatic strategy as weak, as bad negotiating tactics, after projecting like Trump's, and this is what Sebastian Gorka has been saying, that Trump's going to get in there and he's going to project a policy of peace through strength. He's been one of the people beating the drum of Trump's foreign policy talking point, and now he has to answer for it. Where's this peace through strength? Because so far it seems like concession and no concession in return.
I don't know if you just heard what a senior figure in the UK defence community has said about the Trump administration and its plan. The bastards are doing it.
Well, I hope that's fake news, or not from somebody who actually cares about the special relationship between our two countries. So we had Crimea.
By the way, Sebastian Gorka was an assistant to Trump. He was one of Trump's advisors, one of the people in his circle. So he's somebody from Trump world. He is from this world. So this isn't just like nobody either going out there in front of the public trying to defend him. It'd be so much easier if there could be like a shred of honesty here. It's like, look, I disagree with Trump XYZ. I think this is bad strategy. But because of just how Trump works and how he works with people, nah, you're not doing that on TV.
Taken under the Obama administration. Not sure the government or Whitehall called the Obama administration bastards back then. Then for 4 years, we had peace under my boss in the first Trump administration. And then in comes the Biden administration and another invasion of Ukraine. Okay. Not sure the MOD was complaining about the last administration. So either, and I dearly hope
I never wanted a Ukrainian 200 list to be true until I heard Jack was going. My goodness. Yeah, Jack Posobiec said that he was on a Ukrainian kill list. That's another claim Jack Posobiec made, part of Trump's peace envoy to Ukraine. My goodness.
Right. Not sure the MOD was complaining about.
Also, the story that they're talking about is a supposedly like somebody in the British government has said that like Trump's basically given it all up. He's, oh my God, the bastard's done it, is the quote. And Sebastian Gorka is not happy about it.
Last administration. So either, and I dearly hope it's fake news, or that person doesn't have any influence inside the MOD in the UK.
Have you just handed victory to President Putin on a plate?
After 100,000 casualties and the fact that Ukraine will remain an independent nation, that's as asinine a statement, as absolutely absurd and really irresponsible as we heard from The Economist just hours before the phone call saying.
Is that the standard? If Trump just keeps Ukraine in existence, then we can call it a victory. So if he like negotiates everything up to the Dnieper away, like we need a higher standard than this, right? Like it's peace through strength, not peace through treading water.
Saying that Kiev is being iced out of the discussions about the future of that region, as President Trump was literally about to call the president of the Ukraine. So sadly, fake news is not just a phenomena on our side of the Atlantic.
Let's be clear. What we're talking about is Zelensky not being at the table when the talks happen. The reason why that's scary is coming to him and informing him afterwards is not necessarily including him at talks. You want him at the table to be able to advocate for the kidnapped children, the looted Ukrainian art, and all the little details that Trump won't.
But clearly amongst your colleagues in the press in the UK.
President Putin invaded a country. He took a load of land. He killed tens of thousands of Ukrainians. And now it appears the US is saying to him, yeah, you can keep the land that you've taken and stolen from your neighbor.
I like the fact that you think you know what the US is promising to anyone. We've been very clear on the campaign trail. President Trump and his team has been adamant since we came into this building 3 weeks ago that the number one...
He's so snobby. I'm sorry, it's just that the snob in Gorka is impossible to wipe off.
...one priority is to stop...
He's only got one tone, and it's just different. It's just different, like, acoustic levels of snob.
...the bloodshed. And you don't have to tell me, the son of those who literally escaped a communist regime, what the...
I'm Hungarian, and there were communists there. So don't ask me about territory. What does this have to stop? What is this identity politics? Why are you using the Hungarian card? My gosh, these woke Hungarians, man.
...reality of the Russian Federation is today. So please stick to the facts. President Trump...
Absolutely, I absolutely accept that on the campaign trail...
Let me finish my sentence.
On the campaign trail, President Trump said he wanted to stop the war. He wanted to pull the US out today.
He said he would do it in 24 hours.
Let me finish my sentence.
It's been 600 hours.
Sentence.
Go ahead.
You let me? Whether it's the Middle East, whether it's Gaza, whether it is the European continent. Remember, this isn't in our hemisphere. This is in your hemisphere. This is in the Eurasian continent. Whether it is Ukraine, whether the Middle East or anywhere, the number one priority of the commander-in-chief is to stop the bloodshed, not to pander to establishment, left-wing, Ramona talking points.
That's his number one priority, is just to stop the bloodshed. What about strategic priorities? Or, I mean, Pete Hegseth, like, made a big point of, like, stomping on the idea of, like, values don't win wars. Yeah, but you should still defend them. Just because values don't supercharge your bullets because you're fighting for democracy versus dictatorship or whatever, does not mean it isn't worth defending.
That's not why we're here.
If I may ask a question now, Mr. Gorka, and what he did not say on that campaign trail, but which your defense secretary did say today, is that Ukraine, it was unrealistic for Ukraine to want to go back to its pre-2014 borders. That is saying to President Putin, you can keep the land you took by force.
Well, geopolitics and politics is the art of the possible. So my question to you would be, what are you proposing? Is the British army going to deploy to the Donbass or to Crimea? President Trump wants the bloodshed to end, not to live in some cloud cuckoo land of that which is impossible. So the fact is, the fighting will cease because of President Trump, not thanks to the failure of Biden or Obama.
Okay, can I just... I'm sick of all of these schmucks taking things for granted. People took for granted that the Russians were not really going to invade Ukraine. And then people took for granted, now that they had invaded Ukraine, that Ukraine was going to collapse. And then when that did not happen, then they took for granted that it was going to happen a little bit later. And when that happened, it was just, okay, well, let's just move the date a little bit later then. And when that didn't happen, it was like, well, they're going to have to settle here, here, here. And then the counteroffensive started. Right? And so I don't want anybody taking anything for granted, especially when somebody hasn't shown me that they have the expertise to be just saying, like, it is impossible to apply sanctions or military pressure to a point to get the Russians to concede lands that include pre-2014. Hell, you don't even need to say, like, you will get every single inch back, but saying something like, okay, a settlement that includes, and this is not even necessarily a settlement I would go for, but a settlement that's like, fine, Ukraine gets most of its land back, including Donetsk and Luhansk. Russia gets to keep Crimea, no NATO membership, but 1 million European troops in Ukraine to deter for next decade when it will be revisited. See, this would be something where you're like, you know, I don't know, there's a starting point you can move around from. But before you even start negotiations, you're giving it up? I mean, isn't that ridiculous?
And that is the beginning point for Europeans to try and sort out the situation on their continent. President Trump has been explicit. America first is not America alone. So the question is, what are our allies inside NATO going to do to secure the future of that landmass?
But in terms of
does Uncle Sam have to fix everything for you?
In terms of the negotiations, it's clear there will be no US troops. It appears that US is pulling back support.
See how it's being talked about now? Boom, US troops giving up. So now the Russians are like, okay, what's the new demand we can make? Now that Trump's given that up for nothing, there was no demands of like, Russian troops in Ukrainian and occupied Ukrainian territories for duration of ceasefire must be kept to this limit. There's no like alteration of this to this or this to that, or, in order to not have troops in Ukraine, you have to agree to not have large amount of troops stationed in Belarus, which could act as a prong attack into Ukraine. It's nothing. You just gave it up. And then you gave up another thing. And then you gave up another thing. And you've given up already a bunch of Russian priorities. NATO membership, American troop deployments.
Occurred.
What else we giving up? NATO membership, American troop deployments. My goodness. Territory. It's a lot, man. Do you think it would be a good move by Zelensky to demand all of the POWs as a precondition for the start of negotiations? I don't know for the start of negotiations, but if Russia's getting these things as preconditions, Ukraine should get things as preconditions. I mean, that's how a tough negotiator would work. Be like, okay, well, if you want this as a precondition, then our precondition is that you have to release XYZ, right? That's usually how it would work.
Cool.
Well, what I'm fearful of is what it seems like is by not having Ukraine at the table, you're conceding to the demand from Russia to not have the Ukrainians at the table for a precondition. By saying that they're probably not going to have the territory like it was back in 2014, you're conceding territory, you're conceding American troop deployments, you're conceding NATO. It's just concession, and the negotiations aren't even underway. So I'm like, okay, what's next? What else can the Russians negotiate out of you? That's what worries me. Is I feel like we've already hit the bottom of the barrel.
Where is the US's leverage when it comes to these negotiations?
This is a great question. Basic question. What's our leverage?
The most powerful nation in the world, with a president who has won a popular mandate of 77 million votes.
Wow. I'm sorry. Mr. Putin, I don't know if you know who you're dealing with, but I got 77 million votes. So you better back off of Pokrovsk right now, or you'll see what 77 million votes looks like. Just talking point, Andy.
With 12 nuclear aircraft carriers, there is no nation in the world that has greater leverage than the United States and the current incumbent president. So where's the leverage? Everywhere.
And
okay, so so you just said America's strong. So giving these things that Russia wants immediately at the start doesn't matter in reference to leverage because we have a strong army. Okay, but America has made clear that its interests for that strong army are elsewhere. So how do we utilize that leverage to get the concessions we need?
if you share a border with Russia,
You already said you don't want to put that large army in Ukraine.
and maybe you're not a member of NATO, how worried should you be if you live in Georgia, for example?
Well, having very close ties to the region, with my parents having escaped Hungary, I am
You already said that.
incredibly impressed with the nations that do border the Ukraine, who are the easterly members
Georgia does not border Ukraine. I don't know why he called it the Ukraine. It's always a red flag for me.
of NATO. I had very, very good meetings with one of the Baltic nations representatives here just last week. So we're very impressed with how those who have suffered under the jackboot of a
Maybe it means border as it's near to Ukraine, I guess.
communist regime in the Soviet Union, like our Baltic brethren, like Hungary, like Poland, understand the dire threat that is posed by proto-imperial forces on their easterly borders. So we here in the White House hope that those NATO nations will lead the way to show others amongst our allied forces how seriously they should take their own security as part of a shared alliance.
And finally,
Yeah, but Georgia's not in NATO. So what is
Your message, or what message does it send out to any other leader, for example, President Xi of China, who might fancy invading another country, for example, Taiwan?
Oh, I think the president has been explicit. This administration is predicated on freedom, on prosperity, and above all else, national sovereignty. That's why we were so excited with the British people voting to leave.
Immediately say Ukraine's not going to get this land back. Immediately.
The European Union and Brexit to reassert their national sovereignty. So,
and which the majority of the Brits regret, because it didn't really lead to the increased, you know, NHS budget that was promised, and or even the control over their borders.
If you believe,
but of course, some of the hardcore Brexiteers just say, well, that's because we just didn't Brexit hard enough.
But what about Ukraine's national sovereignty?
If you believe,
oh, and Ireland. Oh my God, what a mess that was.
Believe in the national sovereignty of your nation, we will support you. And seriously, look at what support we have.
Of course, look, American government officials kind of like Brexit a little bit, because makes Great Britain more reliant on the United States economically. Certainly, we're a much more influential trading partner with them now, and we have more leverage. So yeah, we have no problems with it over here on this side of the Atlantic.
We will support you. And seriously, look at what support we have given the Ukrainians in the last 3 years.
It's huge.
I don't
it's
think
huge.
I don't think any, again, you're interrupting me, and it's really not done. At the end of the day, we stand with any nation that wishes to implement its sovereignty and which shares our values. And we know that those amongst our civilization that share our values understand, and we stand next to them shoulder to shoulder.
But not the women killed in the maternity hospital in southern Ukraine.
Is that a serious statement? I mean, do you really have
May I finish my sentence now,
No
please?
shame. You have no
Not
shame.
the women
is beneath
killed.
the BBC.
The women killed in the maternity hospital.
Products of the BBC. That is
the families killed
shameful.
in their own apartments
Shameful.
in the capital.
You should be ashamed of yourself.
The people eating in a
I am
pizza
not
place.
even going to countenance replying to such an absolutely abhorrent statement.
Thank you very much for your time, Sebastian Gorka, live from the White House.
Look, on one hand, like that was a sudden left turn by the BBC host, and if that was all she said, but not this dead person or this dead person at the end, with like no further follow-up, I'd be like, yeah, that was kind of shallow. But because of his just immediately jumping around and like going, you know, and like I couldn't hear anything, it was just shame. Just like let her make a fool of herself if she's gonna make a fool of herself, and then go like, well, that was inappropriate, or after. You don't need to like throw a fit. And so I honestly can't even get angry at her because I don't know what her point was gonna be now. I'm hypothetically angry at her, maybe. Not angry, but slightly perturbed. Hypothetically. Anyway, Gorka needs a chill pill. As usual. If you know you're gonna look bad, it's better to throw the fit. Yeah, there's a point to that.